Good morning to the BIM Colombia audience. I'm delighted to introduce to you Dr. Bilal Sukar, a global leading researcher for the digital transformation in the construction industry. Dr. Sukar has studies in business administration, interior design, fine arts, and postgraduate studies in organizational behavior and human resources management. Dr. Sukar has published many award-winning articles and is currently engaged in digital innovation, performance assessment, and process improvement for the BIM implementation. His BIM consultancy, through Change Agents AEC, has reached significant milestones such as BIM Excellence, a method for assessing, benchmarking, and improving individual skills and organizational capabilities. The BIM E initiative, a global platform with esteemed members around the world. And the BIM Dictionary, a valuable online resource for the field. Finally, Dr. Sukar is also well renowned as a global researcher with substantial experience in industry-wide initiatives. So with no further delays, let's start with this interview that happens simultaneously with a very exciting moment for Colombia's digital management development. As you all know, Colombia's path towards BIM is showing progress, and BIM Forum Colombia, that is gathering us today around these key questions for the future of our industry, is a bold example of this evolution. So, Bilal, good morning again, and thank you for being with us. I would like to start with three general questions about BIM definition, companies and BIM, and BIM adoption. So we have seen that the word BIM has been still used randomly to refer about anything related to digital tools. Please provide a brief definition of BIM, and please refer to the main features of your points of adoption model.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you, Rodrigo, and thank you for Colombia BIM Forum for inviting me for this really special moment in the transformation, digital transformation across Latin America and the Caribbean, and especially in Colombia. I'm really honored to be a part of this forum with you. As you mentioned, BIM as a term has changed dramatically over the years, and in some ways it has lost some of its potency, its power, because of too many things have been piled on top of the term. And in some quarters as well, BIM is referred to as a model. In some other quarters, in some countries, it's referred to as modeling, and in other places as combination of everything. In order for us to understand building information modeling, it's very important to understand that it is part of the digital transformation of the built environment in general. And when we say built environment, we're saying the construction industry, we're discussing the real estate industry as well. And building information modeling now means something different to what it meant, let's say 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or even before. Now, when we're discussing BIM, we are really discussing all the efforts, all the technologies, all the processes, all the protocols and standards that are needed to move an industry forward towards digital by default work. Really, it's all about digital transformation. If we want to, however, improve our performance, we cannot say we want to digitally transform. We can't just go from non-digital workflows to digital by default workflows in one go. We will have to pass through steps, stages. We have to introduce new concepts. We have to learn new skills. We have to learn how to do business in a different way. It's very important that we can discuss the technological aspects of BIM, but we have to always remember that it is a business solution. I mean, it's fun to do things through models, It's really interesting to see visualizations and simulations and to be able to speed things up. But we have to always remember that this move towards BIM is a business decision by every organization. It's a strategic move by a market in order to improve its digitalization. So how do we get there? We cannot get there in one go. We have to do it in specific and now well-known stages and steps. And this is what Rodrigo has knowledgeably mentioned about the adoption and how there are points of adoption that we can understand, we can measure, we can seek, we can improve upon. This is based on a lot of research over many, many years. And wherever you are, whatever language you speak, and I do apologize that my Spanish isn't good enough for me to present to you today in that beautiful language, is that when we start our transformation journey from typical ways of working to digital by default ways of working, we have to pass through specific stages. At the beginning, if you're an architect, if you're an engineer, if you're a facility manager, a project manager, etc., the first thing we need to understand is the necessity of BIM. It is something that we cannot avoid. Whether we use the term BIM or we use the term VDC, or you will hear the term digital twin or whatever it is, it's the necessity of moving towards digital ways of working. And the first step, whatever role you play, is first to be aware of it, to understand that it is necessary and inevitable. That's the first step. Now, after being ready to adopt, you go through a process of adoption. You go through stages, and this is typical for all companies of different sizes. Of course, the speeds differ, but all companies go through the same process, which I will describe. First stage is for companies to say they are doing BIM is to adopt specific types of technologies, like something like Revit or ArchiCAD if an architect, something like Tekla, EcoSim, etc. Specific software products that enable you to generate data-rich, information-rich models and exchange these models with others later on. So the first step is always technological, but it never ends there. Actually, the simplest step is the adoption of technology. So through this model of adoption, companies adopt BIM to start modeling and delivering better products than before. So it's similar to the before. Before, companies used to generate 2D documentations, some quantities, using digital means, etc. Adoption of BIM introduces the aspect of 3D models, information-rich models, using specific software, not any software. So you cannot go and use something which is just a visual 3D to do BIM. You have to go use specific software to do that and start generating new deliverables or better deliverables, automating your processes. And this first stage, we refer to it as object-based modeling. This is where you're using these software tools to deliver these 3D models, which allow you to generate 3D visualizations, automate some 2D documentations out of it, allow you to generate some quantities and specifications, and most importantly, depending on your discipline, do some analysis. Okay, so that's really what we call the first stage. And unless the software tools that are adopted and the processes that are deployed and the protocols allow these 5 things, or at least 3 out of these 5 things, we cannot say we are doing BIM. We cannot say that we are doing BIM if we are just generating 3D without automation. We cannot just say we are doing BIM without producing some kind of quantification, some kind of simulation, if you're a structural engineer, about dynamic loads and static loads directly through digital means. So that's what we call the point of adoption, the point where we move from typical ways of working to this digital ways of working, starting with using models. Now, this progresses. Later on, companies start generating these models more efficiently, and then they start to collaborate with others. Once they start collaborate with others, that's a different stage, as we call it. has different requirements, different technologies, different protocols. They have the adoption of standards which are needed for teams to work together really well, and then also improve their performance over time. And beyond that, there are other stages, something called network-based integration, which is a high level of capability maturity only achieved for companies that have already adopted internally, collaborated with others extensively, and over time improved their processes and protocols to allow them to integrate all these technologies and processes and protocols in a unified whole on projects that deploy something like specific procurement models, something you may have heard of the term integrated project delivery and stuff like that. So really, there is a clear progression for any company of any size, to progress from no BIM to BIM productivity, to collaborating with others efficiently, to integrating with the supply chain over time. And this is what's called the adoption curve, which has specific points of adoption.
Wonderful, Bilal. Thank you. So basically, this points of adoption model will allow a diverse constellation of companies to find ways to move and progress in the BIM implementation process. So I would invite the audience to look at the web to your points of adoption model, Bilal. That is quite remarkable, the way it shows this type of progression. However, let me ask you another question related with this topic. Fast-tracking BIM adoption has been a persistent argument placed by several actors of our industry and in general. Are there shortcuts for BIM implementation, or which ones are the unavoidable steps, the type of commitments that you would highlight?
Yeah, the progression towards digital transformation, all these different steps that companies and individuals and even whole markets need to take, is a lengthy process. It doesn't happen in 1 year or 2 years or even 5 years. It's a compilation of small and big steps moving towards that. Meaning, one could say there are no shortcuts, but at the same time, there are also very long routes to avoid. Meaning, there's you could reach your objective in multiple routes. Meaning, the smart way, of course, is to find the best route forward. It could be a little bit lengthier than the shortest route, but it could be the best route for you as an individual, the best route for you as a company, or best route for you as a market. So there are no shortcuts, but there are better routes than others. Now, all the routes which are lead to the target have very specific things that need to be taken care of. They need to be implemented, need to be focused upon. There are always risks of skipping some of these steps. For example, and the discussion would differ if we're discussing adoption within a small company, a large company, or across the whole market. But the steps are similar. And if we are discussing adoption within a company, there's no avoidance of investing in human capital, in improving the competence of people to use software tools, to adopt new processes. There is no avoidance of something we term as process re-engineering. It's a fancy word, but it means that you look at your own processes that you typically do, you map them clearly, you identify areas where you can improve, like say automate, or areas where you can remove steps. And also, there's no avoidance of adoption of national and international standards when collaborating with others. Meaning, it's really good to work internally using your own standards, your own guides, and they could be really efficient. But once we step to the next phase or the next stage of adoption where we want to collaborate with others, there's no avoidance of adoption of national and international standards to allow different companies to work efficiently together. Even if you have the best guides internally, unless companies working together across the supply chain adopt a common terminology, common protocols, common ways of doing things, then the multiplication of benefits of BIM will not materialize. So there's no shortcut there. You cannot avoid adopting national, international standards, especially when it comes to information management. But of course, as mentioned before, there are different routes, and the best route for one company may be a different route for another. A best route for a country, a market as a whole, may be a little bit different for another, but the basic ingredients are the same with different spices, let's say, or different pit stops needed at every route.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bilal. Let's talk briefly about the main actors of this transformation process. As you know, roles of private, public, and academic organizations are slowly starting to change regarding BIM innovation. We are seeing private implementation and execution, new training providers, and public policy enforcement initiatives. The academic, public, and private sector approach is clearly different. Each one has their own challenges, all focusing on the same goal: improve productivity of the construction sector. So how can the efforts of academic, public, and private sector be articulated to have an integrated result for BIM adoption? What would be your view on this tripod type of efforts, and how do you see feasible to articulate a common ground?
Thank you. Very important question about the difference between public-private and the role that different parties play, whether they are public players or they are organizations or they are universities, and of course there are also other players which are very important in the market, like professional bodies and associations. There could be also communities of practice, which we've seen in specific countries. They play a huge role in encouraging adoption. So really understanding not only these main three players that you mentioned, Rodrigo, which are play in most carry most of the burden, but there are other players that need to be involved in the discussion. So understanding who these players are in the market and how they can work together in order to encourage adoption, to facilitate digital transformation, is very important. Different countries have different emphasis on which should lead, of these players should lead the transformation, or should play the main role, or should carry the flag. Okay, and it would be specific to Colombia, as it is specific in Chile, as it is specific in Canada and France and Germany and Australia. They all have a different mix play. It only changes the proportion or the amount of effort that each player is exerting in this space. If we focus on these three, on the public players, which are typically the drivers in a market where the government typically owns or operates or procures a large proportion of housing, of course public works, etc., then the role of the public player is highly important. And give an example of what's happening, for example, in China, for example, where the government plays a major role. Meaning there's the difference between its role and the private sector behind it is so huge. Makes really anything done by the private sector very minimal compared to what the government needs to do. Okay, this is very different, for example, here in Australia, where although we have a large public procurement in different states, but still the private sector play a major role in encouraging adoption of new tools and technologies, etc. So we have to look inside Colombia. And my understanding of Colombia is really as good as my understanding of how to speak really fluent Spanish. It is cursory at best. I can see, how the importance of the public, agent or player in Colombia, and I can see the importance of the private sector as well, of course, of the third one, which you mentioned, these three. Now, it's very important then to see if the public player is the major, has a major role in procurement, then they will have to lead. How do they lead? Typically, they lead by providing some kind of mandate for others to follow. Meaning, if a public procurer is not comfortable of providing a mandate, like here in Australia, the public player does not provide these mandates, then this needs to be complemented by work by the private sector. And how is the private sector represented? Typically, it is presented by its associations and professional bodies, which should take on this challenge. And if the public player does not take on this mandate, professional bodies, chambers of commerce, etc., can play a major role in encouraging industry to move forward. Now, of course, the third party that you mentioned, Rodrigo, academia, is very important here. Why is very important? Because the transformation into digital ways of working is not a simple one, and you will need all the support that is needed from research at the same time, as well as, more importantly, in upskilling current practitioners and preparing future practitioners for these digital ways of working. So without preparing current and upcoming professionals to embrace the digital ways of working, nothing would work, even if you have a strong mandate. Okay, if there's no competence building, it will not work. Same, if there is no push from either the government with the help of the private sector or very strong players in the private sector, like what you're doing in Colombia, to guide people to move forward, then really the change will be slow. So it would be the perfect situation would be for all players to work together and to provide the guidance, provide the competence building, provide the incentives to move forward, and especially three main players that you mentioned.
Wonderful. Allow me to develop a bit more one of these three legs of the system. As you know, education and training seem to be one of the main challenges for BIM transformation. Professionals have to be prepared to the changes experienced at the industry. Universities start to update curriculums and change methods for several career programs. Professionals must be trained to lead the digital transformation. Please share with us your experience from formal education, training, and the making of new capabilities for professionals in the field. A combined effort from different angles is required. How does the professional education look like in the future? What are the strategies you are witnessing around the world, the globe?
Yes, thank you for your question. Again, very important aspect of this digital transformation is the focus on education, and as I prefer to call it, on learning. And learning is something that could be achieved in multiple ways, and there are multiple learning providers, as I prefer to refer to them. And why I call them learning providers is because every learner at the end becomes a learning provider. So meaning, if we take it very simply, someone who goes and receives training at a training institution or university will come back to their organization, and they will provide learning for others. They will train others. Now, looking holistically at the learning spectrum, and this is reflecting on work done in different countries, and we've done research, like in some countries, like we've done whole country competence assessment, etc. We can easily say that for learning to be effective in digital transformation, it must be across the whole spectrum. It must include tertiary institutions like universities, technical schools. It needs to include professional bodies and their CPD programs. It needs to include training providers, and of course, training within the companies themselves. Now, it will not work. Meaning, I cannot stress this enough. If we only focus on training to be something that is delivered by a university, it will not. Meaning, universities have a few challenges on their hands. One, even if they want to teach everyone everything that needs to be taught, it is impossible for the structures to respond quickly enough to digital transformation. I mean, the accelerating nature of digitalization makes it very difficult for universities to respond on their own. Meaning, curricula here in Australia and in many countries will take up to 5 years to change like a course properly, to get it accredited in order to deliver it. So on its own, it's not enough. Also, I'm just starting with the things which are typically people try to address, which on their own will not be enough. It's not enough. It's necessary, but it's not enough to have master's degrees in digital transformation. Okay, it's good to have, and many countries have now programs, a master's level, where they teach professionals about digital transformation. This is good, but it's not good enough. It's not sufficient. We need the education about digital transformation to be across all levels. We need the training about BIM, VDC, digital twins, blockchains, IoTs, all the things related to the change in our industry to be infused in all levels, to be infused on undergraduate courses, okay, to be infused or introduced into CPD programs within professional bodies, and in some countries we've seen it also go to the high school within certain countries. The last year at school, they also introduced some to digital transformation topics related to the built environment. So, what is a good way of looking at learning? A good way of looking at learning is to think of it as a framework that covers all the learning providers, tries to connect them so there's minimum overlap with what they're doing. You don't want a training provider to be offering software training while the university is also offering software training, okay? Meaning one learning provider could be more efficient in training. So we should, if there's a framework, we say, okay, we need software training, we need a process improvement, we need compliance with standards, we need research into digital ways of working, we need this, we need that, etc. And all these topics need to be understood and then distributed between the different players. And this can only be done if there's awareness of this interconnectedness between them. If we are just offering training as a response to a challenge, we will see that challenge like, okay, I need to move into digital transformation. Let me invest in training or in software. That would maybe satisfy a quick need, a market need. But in the long term, it's not going to be enough. There will be a need to develop materials for self-learning, suitable for the local environment. Materials that can be offered at master's and level and above. Materials that can be infused in current programs within the universities, and also materials that need to be delivered to current practitioners and professionals of all levels through their professional bodies and associations. So it's a whole market approach. If, as you mentioned, it's a trifecta, it's a three things, it's a tripod, that, part of the three is very important. And the challenge of it is the diverse players within it. And this needs to be taken really and addressed very carefully and very holistically.
Oh, wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about specific components. Network-based integration is an advanced stage you have mentioned in your work. What are the technological thresholds to overcome in order to provide a fully integrated environment focused on optimization?
Yeah. Integration is a high level of capability, and in a model, and I invite you, like Rodrigo did, to maybe go to BIM initiative, bimexcellence.org, or go to our YouTube channel and look at the point of adoption models and lots of videos about these topics, which explain them in 5 minutes or less, depending on the topic. But if we're looking at integration is the culmination of modeling capability, collaboration capability, then we can reach integration. It is not something that is available to every company, and definitely not as they start their journey or in the middle of their journey. Integration requires that different systems are already well managed, meaning For a team to be integrated, they must be using similar solutions, similar language, similar information systems and information protocols. If these things are available, like for example, a team that always works together, like let's say you have a supply chain, you're in a company with let's say a developer and a contractor, engineers, architects that typically work together repetitively, like they always work together on hospitals, or always work together on schools, or always work together on roads or bridges, then integration becomes possible. Integration is not possible if the supply chain is disintegrated. So you cannot integrate using BIM without an integration of the supply chain. But let's assume that there is this team, and there are teams, everywhere, which work together repetitively. They have a really good chance of improving their capability maturity enough to reach this high level of performance, which really would be the envy of others, because they're continuously improving their performance. So changing the process here, optimizing the technology there, etc. But just to be brutally honest, integration, it's not something that would be achieved easily. It is a repetitive process of really doing modeling really well, working with others really well over time, having stable connections in the market to reach integration.
Wonderful. Right. So we are approaching to the end of the interview, Bilal. I have two more questions for you. Briefly, I would like to refer to the construction industry, which is, as you know, a quite conservative territory. Experienced professionals take charge and responsibility of complex and demanding projects. So innovation is not exactly the preferred word for long-term established teams. So what are the actions you would point out to trigger successful learning curves in the industry as a whole?
Yeah. Now, of course, it differs by the market, but are very specific triggers that have seemed to work in different markets, and I can name if you wish. But the idea is you will see in certain markets an emphasis on a pull factor. Let's call it, some markets will focus on mandating something. Some kind of authority, the government or a governmental authority or someone the government chooses to lead the process will focus on mandating something, saying by this year you should be doing your deliveries this way. By that year you should be doing it the other way. In other countries that don't have this mandating approach, we found they provide incentives. Incentives, it could be tax breaks, it could be being a preferred supplier of services, etc. Based on what we know and what we're learning through continuous investigation in different countries, that the best formula is the one that includes both. There is some kind of mandate. Some doesn't have to be really harsh or very specific or very prescriptive, but it must be clear. Any mandate that's not clear will not work. You should not, for example, say, I want you to be really good at BIM, by the year 2021. This would not work. Also, you could not say, I want something very, very specific by the year 2022 or 2023, something that not suits everyone. So really the type of mandate, and mandates differ from one country to another, is very important. So having some kind of mandate is one part. The second is incentives. Incentives could be very different types. It could be the government, if it's able to, supporting industry, providing subsidized training, incentivizing its tax breaks. It could be by celebrating success. Incentives could take many forms. So by combining these two, innovation will have a kickstart, meaning in the digital environment, built environment, but of course the formula for Colombia will be different than others. Right.
Great. So I would like to close this interview, Bill, by saying that today, as you know, in this BIM Colombia event, the Colombian BIM policy will be launched. So a 2 years effort working along with the public sector, private sector, and academic institutions, that in a couple of hours, a government representative will present the BIM strategy to Colombia with a roadmap for the next years. Your contribution in the field has been a reference for this effort. So please share with us a closing remark about such a process that other countries undertook that might be of relevance for this path that Colombia embarks on today.
Well, first, congratulations. Great to hear that you've reached this very important milestone, that you already have stabilized the discussions between government and private sector and academia. This is a huge achievement. Congratulations to all of you. Of course, this is the start of the process of digital transformation for the market, and I wish you really success with this. I'm sure you'll reach it. Now, different countries have approached this, of course, again. What we see, from success stories in digital partnership, it's always been, a government partnering with a association, with the community of practice, and driving, the market forward. Good examples would be, things you know about, like what's happening in the UK. You know what's happening in Chile, for example, between the public sector, in particular there, that it's a huge success story, and how the public sector is improving its BIM capability. Also, I'm working closely with, in Canada, with the Quebec province, where there's a huge partnership between the government there and the private sector in the form of incentives. So there's no mandate in Quebec, but there's a lot of incentives, which balances a little bit the lack of mandate. Now, as Colombia moves forward with which is approach to this, it will find its right balance. As through this negotiation, say, okay, based on our historical markers, based on what we're trying to achieve, based on our specific requirements, what is the right balance? What is the right balance? What is the mandate we want? Okay, what kind of incentives we can give? What is really this educational framework? But since you've reached this milestone, meaning it's an indication that you are taking no shortcuts. You are putting in the hard work in order to move the industry forward, and I congratulate you for reaching this important milestone.
Thank you very much, Bilal. I would like to invite you to keep an eye on Colombia's BIM development, and I hope we will have the opportunity to share with you how Colombian BIM strategy perform in these crucial times that we are all facing. And I thank BIM Colombia again, and until the next time, Bilal.
Thank you. Thank you, BIM Colombia. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening. Bye-bye.